My name is Vivian, and if you're reading this, I want you to know that my life changed completely on a day I expected nothing more than another ordinary Monday. It's funny how life works like that, how one moment can shift everything you thought was stable beneath your feet. Let me start at the beginning, because it's important for you to understand who I am and where I came from before we get to what happened. I've worked at Crestwood and Vale for nearly 8 years. Yes, 8 long years of climbing the corporate ladder, proving myself in every meeting, project, and late-night email chain. The company is a mid-sized marketing firm with an office nestled in the heart of downtown. A sleek glass building that reflects the city skyline during the day and glows softly under streetlights at night. To many people outside its walls, Crestwood and Vale might just be another faceless corporation, but to me, it felt like home. Or at least, it did until last week. When I first joined as a junior strategist fresh out of college, I had no idea what I was getting into. But over time, I grew to love the rhythm of the place, the hum of keyboards clicking, the buzz of brainstorming sessions, the quiet intensity of deadlines looming over us all. My coworkers became my second family, the kind you gripped coffee cups with while complaining about clients or celebrated small victories alongside after hours spent perfecting campaigns. And then there were the leaders, the executives whose names carried weight within those hallowed halls. For most of my tenure here, James Monroe had been our CEO, a man known for his steady hand and genuine care for his employees. Under him, Crestwood thrived, and so did I. But change has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. A few months ago, rumors began swirling about James stepping down. At first, they seemed far-fetched, like whispers passed between cubicles during slow afternoons. But soon enough, official announcements followed. James wasn't retiring. He was leaving to pursue something bigger, though none of us knew exactly what that meant. In his place would come someone new, someone chosen by the board to take Crestwood into its next chapter. We didn't know much about him except his name, Adrian Hargrove. Adrian arrived last Monday morning, and let me tell you, he made quite the entrance. He swept through the doors of the office like a storm cloud rolling in off the ocean, dark suit, sharp jawline, piercing eyes that scanned the room as if sizing everyone up. There was something unsettling about him, though I couldn't put my finger on it right away. Maybe it was the way he barely acknowledged anyone as he strode toward James's old office, now his, or maybe it was the cold efficiency with which he dismissed the welcome committee James had organized. Whatever it was, it left a sour taste in my mouth. Still, I try not to dwell on it too much. After all, transitions like these happen. New bosses bring new ideas, new energy. I told myself to give him a chance, even as unease prickled at the edges of my mind. Little did I know, Adrian Hargrove wasn't interested in chances. Not for me, anyway. It started innocently enough. That same Monday afternoon, Adrian called a mandatory meeting in the conference room. Everyone filed in, curious and slightly nervous. He stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back, surveying us like a general inspecting his troops. Without preamble, he launched into a speech about shaking things up, about streamlining operations and cutting costs. His words were polished, rehearsed, but there was an edge to them, an almost predatory gleam in his eye that made my stomach churn. "Change is inevitable," he said, his voice smooth yet commanding. "And some of you may find yourselves displaced in the process." Displaced? The word hung heavy in the air, unspoken questions rippling through the crowd. Who did he mean? Was he talking about layoffs? Restructuring? No one dared ask. Instead, we sat there, frozen, waiting for whatever bombshell he planned to drop next. And then it came. "Vivian Carter," he said, his gaze locking onto mine across the room. My breath hitched. "You're fired." Just like that. No explanation, no discussion. Fired. On his very first day. The room fell silent, save for the sound of chairs creaking as heads turned to look at me. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, embarrassment mingling with disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything I'd done for this company. But Adrian didn't flinch. He simply stared at me, daring me to challenge him. "I'll need you to clear out your desk immediately," he added, his tone clipped. "HR will handle the paperwork." I don't remember standing up or walking out of the room. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching myself from a distance. Colleagues whispered apologies as I passed, but their words barely registered. All I could think about was how unfair it was, how arbitrary. Why me? What had I done to deserve this? That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, replaying the events of the day over and over again in my head. By the time morning rolled around, exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders, but I forced myself to get up anyway. If nothing else, I needed closure. I decided to stop by the office one last time, to say goodbye to the people who mattered, to collect any personal belongings I hadn't grabbed the day before. What I didn't expect was to walk into chaos. As I approached Crestwood and Vale, I noticed a flurry of activity near the entrance. Employees milled about in clusters, their expressions tense, voices low and urgent. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Pushing past the crowd, I stepped inside and froze. Adrian's secretary, her name was Rachel, was storming down the hallway, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her blouse untucked, her hair falling loose from its bun. She looked furious, distraught, and utterly unlike the composed professional I'd always seen her as. Without hesitation, she marched straight into Adrian's office, slamming the door shut behind her. The sound echoed through the otherwise quiet space, drawing stares from everyone nearby. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if we were collectively holding our breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Seconds later, raised voices erupted from behind the closed door. Rachel's shrill tone cut through the air, sharp and accusatory. Adrian's deeper voice responded, calm but laced with irritation. Their argument escalated quickly, snippets of their conversation leaking out despite the thick wood separating them from the rest of us. "You can't do this," Rachel shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You promised." "I don't owe you anything," Adrian snapped back, his voice eerily controlled. "You should have known better than to trust me." The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. Whatever was going on between them, it wasn't good, and judging by the shocked murmurs spreading through the office, I wasn't the only one piecing things together. Adrian wasn't just ruthless, he was manipulative, calculating, dangerous. Rachel emerged moments later, tears streaming down her face. She didn't look at anyone as she fled down the hallway, clutching a box of belongings to her chest. The sight of her broke something inside me. Here was a woman who had clearly trusted Adrian, relied on him, only to be betrayed in the worst possible way. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone in feeling blindsided by him. By the end of the day, whispers filled the office. Rumors spread faster than wildfire, fueled by speculation and fear. Some claimed Rachel had been promised a promotion in exchange for loyalty, only to be cast aside once Adrian secured his position. Others suggested she had uncovered something incriminating about him and paid the price for it. Either way, one thing was clear. Adrian Hargrove wasn't just here to shake things up, he was here to destroy lives. For the first time since being fired, I felt a spark of anger ignite within me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, about exposing the truth, about making sure Adrian didn't get away with whatever schemes he had planned. But how? How could someone like me, a former employee with no leverage, no power, possibly stand against someone like him? The answer came to me slowly, piece by piece, as I sifted through memories of my time at Crestwood. There were files I'd worked on, projects I'd overseen, connections I'd built. Information that might seem insignificant on its own, but could paint a damning picture when pieced together. If I played my cards right, if I reached out to the right people, maybe, just maybe, I could turn the tables on Adrian. But revenge isn't easy. It requires patience, strategy, and nerves of steel. As I sat alone in my apartment that evening, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen, I knew I had a choice to make. I could wallow in self-pity, letting Adrian win without a fight, or I could rise above it. I could fight back. And so, with trembling fingers, I began typing. Emails, notes, documents, all of it poured out of me in a flood of determination. Each keystroke felt like a step toward reclaiming control, toward proving that Adrian wasn't untouchable. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my 8 years at Crestwood and Vale, it's this. Power dynamics are fragile. They shift. They crumble. And sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to push them over the edge. This wasn't over. Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of clandestine meetings, late-night research, and calculated risks. I reached out to former colleagues who had also been affected by Adrian's abrupt changes, some fired like me, others demoted or sidelined. At first, they were hesitant to talk, wary of retaliation if word got back to Adrian. But as I shared snippets of what I'd uncovered, emails, financial records, internal memos, they began to see the bigger picture. Together, we pieced together a pattern. Adrian wasn't just restructuring Crestwood and Vale for efficiency, he was dismantling it piece by piece, siphoning resources into shadowy ventures that benefited him personally. One name kept surfacing in my investigation, Rachel. Though she hadn't returned to the office after her explosive confrontation with Adrian, her absence spoke volumes. She'd been his right hand during his early days at the company, privy to every decision he made. If anyone knew where the skeletons were buried, it was her. So, armed with nothing but determination and a list of questions, I tracked her down. Rachel lived in a quiet suburb on the outskirts of the city. Her house was modest, tucked away behind a row of tall oak trees. When she answered the door, her eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, I thought she might slam it shut in my face. Instead, she stepped aside, letting me in without a word. Her living room was cluttered but cozy, filled with framed photos and stacks of books. She offered me tea, which I accepted, though neither of us touched our cups. The tension between us was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, I broke the silence. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "Adrian ruined my life. He's ruining this company. And I think you know more than you're letting on." Rachel stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back against the couch and ran a hand through her disheveled hair. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," she said softly. "But fine. Ask your questions." Over the next hour, Rachel spilled everything. Adrian had indeed promised her a promotion, a senior executive role, in exchange for helping him navigate the inner workings of Crestwood. She trusted him, believing his grand vision for the company aligned with hers. But once he secured control, he turned on her, accusing her of incompetence and forcing her out. What stung the most, though, was discovering that Adrian had used her access to sensitive information to orchestrate shady deals, funneling company funds into offshore accounts. "He thinks he's untouchable," Rachel said bitterly. "And maybe he is. The board loves him. They don't ask questions as long as profits look good on paper." "But they will," I replied, my resolve hardening. "If we show them the truth, they'll have no choice but to act." Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "What do you need from me?" With Rachel's cooperation, the pieces finally fell into place. We compiled a dossier detailing Adrian's misdeeds, illegal transactions, falsified reports, even evidence of harassment claims he'd swept under the rug. It was damning, irrefutable proof that would bring him down. But delivering it to the board wasn't going to be easy. Adrian had ingratiated himself with them, earning their trust through carefully crafted lies and polished presentations. Convincing them to turn against him would require more than just documents. It would take strategy. I decided to approach James Monroe, the former CEO. Though retired, he still held significant influence within the company. More importantly, he cared deeply about Crestwood and Vale and its employees. If anyone could sway the board, it was him. Tracking James down wasn't difficult. He'd moved to a small coastal town an hour outside the city. When I arrived at his home, he greeted me warmly, though there was sadness in his eyes. Retirement hadn't suited him. He missed the hustle and bustle of corporate life. Over coffee, I laid out everything: Adrian's schemes, Rachel's revelations, and the evidence we'd gathered. By the time I finished, James's jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "That son of a bitch," he muttered, shaking his head. "I should have seen this coming." "You can still fix it," I urged. "You built this company. You know how much it means to everyone who works there. Don't let him destroy it." James didn't hesitate. Within days, he called an emergency meeting with the board, presenting our findings alongside a passionate plea to remove Adrian from power. The board members were shocked, some defensive, others outraged. But the evidence was undeniable, and one by one, they turned against him. Adrian fought back, of course. He denied everything, accused us of fabricating lies, even threatened legal action. But his bluster only made him look guiltier. In the end, the board voted unanimously to terminate his contract and launch a full investigation into his activities. Crestwood and Vale would recover, albeit slowly, and James agreed to step in temporarily as interim CEO until a suitable replacement could be found. As for me, I didn't return to the company. Too much had changed, too many bridges burned. But I found solace in knowing I'd played a part in exposing the truth. Rachel reconnected with old contacts and landed a new job at a rival firm, while James worked tirelessly to restore faith in Crestwood's leadership. The victory wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Months later, sitting on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, I reflected on everything that had happened. Life had thrown me a curveball, but instead of crumbling, I'd risen to the challenge. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was messy, exhausting, and emotionally draining. But justice felt like redemption. And sometimes, that's all you need to move forward. Months turned into a year, and though the scars of that tumultuous time still lingered, they began to fade. Not entirely, but enough for me to feel like I was finally stepping into a new chapter of my life. Crestwood and Vale had undergone significant changes under James's interim leadership. The board implemented stricter oversight measures, ensuring transparency at every level. Morale among employees improved as trust was slowly rebuilt, and the company began to thrive again, returning to its roots as a place where innovation and collaboration flourished. For me, however, the journey didn't end with Adrian's downfall. After everything that happened, I realized I needed more than just closure. I needed purpose. Sitting idle wasn't an option anymore. So, I took a leap of faith and founded my own consulting firm, Carter & Company, specializing in corporate ethics and accountability. It started small, a few clients here and there, but word spread quickly. My experience at Crestwood gave me credibility, and soon I was working with companies across the country, helping them navigate crises and build cultures rooted in integrity. Rachel became one of my first hires. She brought invaluable expertise to the table, and together we made a formidable team. Watching her grow into her role as a senior strategist filled me with pride. She'd gone from being a victim of Adrian's manipulation to someone who empowered others to stand up against injustice. Her resilience inspired me daily, reminding me why I'd started this venture in the first place. James eventually stepped down as interim CEO, handing over the reins to a compassionate yet driven leader named Elena Torres. Under her guidance, Crestwood and Vale soared to new heights, becoming a beacon of ethical business practices in an industry often marred by greed and corruption. Elena even reached out to me personally, inviting me to give a keynote speech at their annual leadership summit. Standing on that stage, looking out at a sea of faces eager to learn and grow, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the lessons I'd learned, the people who had stood by me, and the opportunity to make a difference. But perhaps the happiest ending came not in the form of professional success, but in the personal connections I rediscovered along the way. In the chaos of fighting Adrian, I neglected relationships outside of work, friends, family, even myself. Once the dust settled, I made a conscious effort to reconnect. Dinners with my parents became a weekly tradition. Laughter-filled nights with old college friends reminded me of simpler times, and quiet evenings spent reading or painting helped me find peace within myself. And then there was Daniel. We met completely by chance, at a coffee shop near my office. He was sitting at a corner table, typing furiously on his laptop when I accidentally spilled my latte all over his notes. Mortified, I stammered apologies while grabbing napkins to clean up the mess. To my surprise, he laughed it off, saying, "Well, if nothing else, you've given me a good excuse to take a break." That awkward encounter turned into hours of conversation. We discovered shared passions for storytelling, social justice, and bad puns. Over the following weeks, our accidental meetings at the coffee shop became intentional ones, and before long, Daniel became a steady presence in my life. He listened without judgment as I recounted the highs and lows of the past year, offering support and encouragement when I needed it most. With him, I found not just companionship, but a partner who believed in me wholeheartedly. One crisp autumn evening, as we walked through the park where I used to sit and reflect during those uncertain days, Daniel stopped suddenly and turned to face me. His eyes sparkled with mischief, and he held out a small envelope. Inside was a ticket to a writing workshop in Paris, one of my lifelong dreams. "I know how much you love telling stories," he said, smiling. "So let's go tell some together." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by the gesture. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about hope, about believing that life could be beautiful again after so much turmoil. And so, with Rachel cheering us on and James promising to keep an eye on Carter and Company while I was away, Daniel and I boarded a plane to France, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. As I sat in a quaint Parisian cafe weeks later, penning notes for what would eventually become a memoir about my experiences, I couldn't help but smile. The road had been long and winding, filled with heartache and triumph alike. But now, surrounded by cobblestone streets, golden sunlight, and the promise of a brighter future, I knew I'd found exactly where I was meant to be.